Welcome to the Money is Emotional podcast with Christine Luken, the financial dignity coach. In this podcast, we help you recover a positive and peaceful relationship with your personal finances. We do this by bringing together wise money management with emotional intelligence. Join us for this journey where we navigate our relationship with money as Christine Luken draws from years of experience and guest experts to help you get to the root of your money issues.
Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Money is Emotional podcast. I am your host, Christine Luken. Today's episode is Money Stories in Black and White, Part 2. Our special guest, Casandra Austin-McDonald, shares more of her experience with money as a biracial woman. Cassandra and I both felt that our conversation in the last episode was incomplete. In fact, within 48 hours, we were on the phone with each other discussing the things that we wished we had included. So here we are back again. If you did not listen to part 1 of this conversation, please stop and go back and listen to that one. It's episode 49. We will be right here waiting for you. So I am honored to welcome back my special guest, Casandra Austin-McDonald, self-mastery mentor, wife, mother, and Qigong practitioner extraordinaire. Welcome back, Casandra.
Thank you. I'm so happy that I'm back.
Well, I think we knew there was going to be a part 2. I just don't think we knew it was going to be this soon.
Yeah, our spirits knew.
Yeah. Yes, it was just not enough time. There were so many things that were left unsaid, so many things that we didn't get to dive deeply enough into. And I find it very interesting that we are recording this exactly 1 year after the Whole New Woman retreat, which was very pivotal and meaningful for me in my personal development. So it's so interesting and definitely a divine connection that happened to bring the two of us together.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought of that when I saw you post about the 1 year anniversary of the retreat, and I was like, yeah, this was meant to happen today.
Yes, it most definitely was. So, when you and I hopped on our call, some of the things that came up for you that we wanted to dive back into, the first thing is you told me that you still carry some resentment towards your white grandmother for not having money conversations with you, because she did with your white cousins, right?
I'm not sure the depth of the conversation she had with them, but I know that there was more support with finances than in comparison to what I received. And one example in particular, a few years ago, I was up north visiting, and she was sharing about paying for my cousin's college tuition. And I was thinking to myself, well, you didn't pay for mine, and I'm your first grandchild, and I'm named after you. Why would you not pay for my college tuition? Why did I have to get student loans after I had my son? And that added even another layer of resentment, because the only money conversations I recall her having with me was how to get out of debt, how to make sure that I paid my student loans back, because she co-signed on one of them. And there wasn't conversations around investing in the stock market, investing in mutual funds, because that's how she had gotten herself into the financial position she was in. She didn't have those conversations with me. And it felt like the conversation was more so geared around, don't mess my name up, because my name's on there too. and I felt resentment because, I did pay back. That was a private student loan. And then I had student loans through the institution that actually were forgiven, because the career I had at the time was in the criminal justice field. And so I was on a forgiveness loan program that actually went through, and my loans were forgiven, thank God. But there was private loans I got through her that she co-signed on. And The money conversations we had were just around paying it back, make sure you pay it back. But we didn't have conversations around building wealth or securing your financial future or being financially sovereign as a woman. She always made very financial savvy choices in her partners, in her decisions, in the way that she built her net worth. And those were conversations I noticed that unless I was being really observant and kind of prying when she was having discussions with my aunts and other family members, I wasn't really privy to.
So she was obviously having them with other people. It wasn't like she was just shut down and didn't talk about her success or what she was doing.
Right. Yeah. It seemed, growing up, my grandmother was the one who was always giving us kind of like a handout. Growing up, I remember that anytime we needed a car, she gave us a car. We needed furniture, she bought furniture. Somebody got into a financial rut, she was pulling them out of it. And I remember growing up observing that and telling myself, I want to be my grandmother. I want to be the one that's giving. I want to be the one that has it. I want to be the one that is able to do this. But no one was having these conversations with me about how she put herself in the financial position to do that. It was more so of, we'll save you, we'll help you get out of things, but how do I become financially free and sovereign so I can be that myself? And that is kind of where the resentment was starting to be birthed as a little girl, because I was noticing a difference in the way that she was interacting with my family, my parents and my siblings was more so from this charity case, whereas with my other family members, my aunts, uncles, her other children, it was more so them having conversations around what money moves they were making. So two totally different conversations.
Yeah. Whereas if she had given you that education, you wouldn't need the handout,
Exactly.
Or there'd be a lot less of those. Right.
And that was always my thinking. I always wondered, and I'm one of the only ones, I don't think out of my parents and my siblings, I think I'm the only one that hasn't received a car from her. I always bought my own cars and never needed, because I made this choice within myself. I want to be like her. And so I just always try to be conscious and mindful. But I wondered how have things could have been for not only myself, but my family, my parents and my siblings, if she was actually sitting down with us and saying, I notice a pattern. I find that I'm always helping you. I find that I'm always giving you cars or whatever you need. Like, let's sit down and talk about money. And that it was more so we became gossip for the family.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I have seen that with, certain people who are, financially savvy, who have wealth. Some of them are more of the mentor, like, let me take you under my wing, and also giving the help. But then you've also got other people who it is almost like I'm holding something over you.
Yeah.
And that does not feel good.
Oh, no. And I think I felt that as a little girl. I've always been very intuitive and very discerning. And I discerned that as a little girl, that you better figure out how to be financially independent or you're going to be the next talk at the family dinner. And so I kind of internalized what was happening. I was very observant and I would notice. And I just remember telling myself these stories like, that's not going to be me. This is not going to be me. I don't want to be this. I don't want to have to be in charity mode and always receiving a handout. While I believe support is helpful, for me, I believe that if you're giving without the information so that someone can apply that information, it's almost the difference between giving someone a fish versus teaching them how to fish. And I wanted to learn how to fish and no one was teaching me how to fish.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's both. If you're hungry, I am going to give you a fish right now. Yeah. And then once your belly's full, then I'm going to teach you how to fish.
Exactly.
And I think that's really the healthy way to do it. So I find it interesting that in some ways your grandma was a mentor, that she did inspire you in certain ways, but then there were other things where you're like, I'm not doing it that way.
Yes. Yeah. it's funny, my husband, you know, I call him the Mr. Online. We were talking last night and I said, I get really annoyed when I see people post online their charities and them taking pictures of homeless people or taking pictures of this person, and they post it online and say, oh, look at me, look what I did. And it bothers me because I have this, I want to be one of those like silent philanthropists that give in silence. And I do that. You know, if I see a homeless person, I give, and I do what I can with what I have right now. But it bothers me when I see that. I know part of that is because that was my experience growing up, where we were talked about. And I just have this belief, if you're giving from the kindness of your heart, let it be that, but you don't need to showcase it or broadcast it just to, you know, get a pat on the back or be perceived as more righteous or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, this whole topic of generosity is very loaded emotionally. And it's, you know, to me, I am more like you, where it's like, I don't trumpet it out there. But then at the same time, one of the things that I want to do, and you know this about me, is to bring up, you know, these, you know, legions of wealthy women who are going to do good things. And so it's like, sometimes there's this tension of, well, I've got to talk about these things, at least in certain aspects, in certain containers, not to call attention, be like, oh, look how great I am. But it's like,
right.
This is part of wealth. Like, part of wealth is you get to be the benefactor. You get to be the person that writes the check. You get to be the person who helps when there's a need without having to sweat it. But then there is also that piece of, how can we also mentor, and how can we also give and help people in a dignified way? Because I certainly think there's a wrong way to do it.
I agree 1,000%. It's about keeping, well, your financial dignity. It's about keeping people's dignity intact.
So you've told me that when it comes to moving to the next level of wealth, that there's this fear of leaving other people behind. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, because I think this can show up in multiple ways. I definitely see this, you know, you and I have talked about this, that it is definitely something that's prevalent in the Black community. It's also pretty prevalent in the poor white community, the hillbilly community. Mm-hmm. But it can show up in multiple ways, you know, in your personal life and your business life. And I know you and I have had some discussions about this. So let's talk about, you know, some of those things that come up as, you know, you're stepping into this wealthy woman identity. There's also some of these fears that are kind of, you know, clipping you at the heels.
Yeah. Well, it really comes down to my lived experience with my family. You know, I left home when I was 16 or 17 to go live with my aunt, my mom's sister, my grandmother's youngest daughter. And so, you know, the first time I heard that phrase of "you're leaving us behind" was by my own two little sisters. And I was accused of leaving them behind on my pursuit to get out of a messed up situation and wanting to have a better life for myself. So it's a narrative I've heard from my own immediate family. And then throughout my life, I've always been a high achiever. I've always been very ambitious and very driven. It's just in my DNA. And so whenever I've set my eyes on a goal or a vision or a desire and I pursue it, I usually have people around me who would give me these stories or these messages of like, why aren't you ever satisfied? Why isn't this good enough? Why can't you just be happy? Why isn't this enough? Or you have a good life, or, you know, you had that good job. Why didn't you just settle for that good job? Or it was always like this, like, stay here with us. Don't go beyond. And I think part of that is because those of us, and I think it's a high achiever thing. I don't even, you know, when I think about it, it's not necessarily like Black or white or certain demographic, although we hear it a lot in the Black community. I think it is a high achiever thing. Those of us who are high achievers just know that unless you are wired that way, people just do not get us. They don't understand us. I mean, we reach a goal and we're already eyes set on the next one. Like the target is always moving. And my target just so happens, the target just so happens to be embodying a wealthy woman identity and co-creating wealth with my husband. And the fear really settled in 5 years ago. My husband and I relocated to Florida, and it was a huge point in my journey because I resigned from my 9-to-5, sold my home, moved across the country with my husband, and to most of my peers and surroundings, they thought I was batshit crazy and lost my mind because I gave up my good job to move across the country to start a new life. But then when we got here, we started off in a luxury community, which was like townhomes, because we wanted to be settled here for a little bit before we purchased a home. And I remember it was the first time I really experienced survivor's guilt, which is this phenomenon where you escape an environment and you could be the only or one of few, and there's people still behind. And it took me over a year to actually enjoy being in Florida. I just felt so guilty that like the reality was settling in that I have created a whole different reality than my immediate family is aware of, even though it's nowhere near the distance of where I aspire to be or my peers like yourself are at. I had come to the realization that where I'm at in my life right now, they may never experience, and I felt guilty about that.
Yeah, I could see that. When I broke up with my ex, I pretty much had to cut ties with all of those friends because of just the dysfunction. And, I remember some of them reaching out and basically being like, I can't believe you're leaving all of us behind.
Yeah.
And it was like, I have to do this for my own sanity. And it was very interesting because, once I got into a new environment with new people, like every single part of my life started getting better.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what my reality has been. I've healed from complex childhood traumas these last 5 years that was taking me decades to try to heal just by changing my environment and changing the type of people that I am in relationship with. And I've even up-leveled my relationship with money to a completely, especially being in a relationship with you and being in the Wealthy Woman Book Club. I mean, my mindset has expanded so much about what's possible for me, not just as a woman, but as a woman of color, just by putting myself in the room. I've invested more in myself these last 5 years than I ever have in my personal development. And the types of risks and investments I made in myself, I don't know if I would have felt the courage to choose that for myself if I was still in those environments around these people who would say things like, why can't you just be satisfied? Why can't you just be happy? You have a good life. Your husband's an engineer and you're in this profession and you guys make good money. Like, why can't you ever be satisfied? Whereas now I'm away from all that noise and I can really connect to my own inner voice. And my inner voice says, you're meant for more and you're meant to be wealthy and you need to put yourself in the darn room so you can figure out how to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I distinctly remember a conversation between my ex-fiance and his uncle. So my ex-fiance had just gotten a really good job with a company truck. And we went over to his uncle's house for Christmas, or I should say his uncle's trailer. It was a trailer park. And we obviously pull up in the company truck and his uncle says, oh, look at you, fancy man. You now got the company truck. Pretty soon you're going to be too good to come and have Christmas in the trailer park with us.
See, it's stuff like that I had that experience actually not too long ago. I was talking to someone who we used to be really, really close until she started talking really badly about rich people. And she was like, oh, rich people this, rich people that. And I just one day said, one day I'm going to be one of those rich people that you keep talking about. And she just got quiet.
Mm.
And I said, I feel really uncomfortable when you bash people who have money, because that is what I'm currently desiring to create in my life. And I have concerns about how you're going to perceive me when I create a certain amount of wealth. And then we had another conversation later down the line where I was sharing what I would do with my wealth. And aside from giving and being generous, I was talking about traveling, which she was aware of. But I said, oh, I just can't wait until I can hire a stylist and I could change my wardrobe. But she said, well, why would you do that? You're already stylish and have an amazing wardrobe. Like, why would you? And I just realized then that relationship doesn't hold space for my expansion and for my rise into becoming a wealthy woman. And those are the conversations that I get to reserve for, like the Wealthy Woman Book Club or other spaces that I'm in. And for me, it's made me realize too, that when you're aspiring to create wealth, being mindful of the types of conversations we're having and who we're having them with, because sometimes people just aren't there yet, but there are people who are, or they're beyond where we want to be. And we just have to stay connected to them so that that fire and that flame continues to get fed and it doesn't go out by the people who aren't there.
Dare to enter the Wealthy Woman Book Club, where answers exist to forbidden questions, where women of all ages and income secretly gather, where knowledge is shared, where possibilities are explored, where women claim their power. Dare to stay a spell in the Wealthy Woman Book Club. In this place, we lift each other up. In this place, we start dreaming again. In this place, we see financial miracles. In this place, we grow through the glory and the failure. In this place, we step into a new identity. Dare to champion the Wealthy Woman Book Club. We're creating a future where women are financially empowered across the globe. We're creating a future where our daughters stand on equal financial footing with our sons. We're creating a future where we purchase with our principles rather than price tags. We're creating a future where we use the power of money for the benefit of people and the planet. Welcome to the Wealthy Woman Book Club. Dare to come in, woman. Come in. Join us at wealthywomanbookclub.com.
Well, it's interesting because about 2 months after that conversation with his uncle, Jeff got a DUI in the company truck and totaled the company truck and lost his job.
Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah. So
talk about dodging a bullet.
That need for belonging, though, is so strong. Do you know what I mean? Especially with your family of origin. And I know I have experienced this, and I think you probably have as well. As you progress in your business and you start to raise your rates, you know that some of the people that have been with you in the beginning aren't going to be able to stay with you.
Right.
And there is some fear of leaving people behind.
Yeah, I would say this last year is something I've really had to navigate around the whole New Woman retreat. That was really when I realized that the type of experience that I want to offer, and even just hearing your feedback about the mastery in my craft and my work, like you really got to raise your rates. Like you should be charging this amount. And I realized there was this part of me that was still trying to help past versions of myself, because that's what we're told in the beginning of all of this is, who were you when you first started? And I realized, well, technically I've been on this path all my life. So if we want to go there, that's a lot of years to try to figure out which entry point should I figure out people come to me at. But also, I did feel guilty around saying that, I want to charge 5-figure rates for my private one-on-one. I felt guilty about that because I didn't really see a lot of examples of women who looked like me who could either pay that or who were charging that themselves and who weren't business coaches. I wasn't seeing a lot of healers or feminine embodiment coaches or relationship coaches who were women of color, either charging those rates or paying those rates. It was more so in the business coaching realm. And so it really caused me this last year to really sit with myself and ask myself, can you really sustain a business doing this? And I realized the answer was no, because it makes me think about, one of our former mentors, when she says, for me, for you, for us. And I realized there was a lot of for you in there, but I was leaving me out of the equation with the money part and receiving compensation. And what's interesting is literally just this morning, I was reading a scripture. I had never seen the scripture in my entire life. Matthew 10:10, the second part, where it says, the workman is worthy of meat. And when I looked up workman, it said teacher. And when I looked up worthy, it said deserving. And when I looked up meat, it said wages. So I'm supposed to get paid.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yeah. Well, and, experiencing your work through the retreat and through some of the one-on-one and group stuff that I have done with you, I absolutely know that the expertise and the mastery that you bring to your work is top notch. And, to me, it's like, I always want to hire the best person that that I can reasonably afford, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to be going into debt, but it's like, I want to hire the best person that I can to address whatever it is that I need. And, when someone comes to me and their rates are lower than I would expect, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe they're not bringing to the table what I think they're bringing to the table. And so that's why I specifically told you after the retreat, like, you need to do this again. And, you can definitely charge more for this because this was outstanding.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I feel like it is important for me when I am interacting with entrepreneurs, especially women of color, to tell them, you are absolutely, you absolutely need to be charging X, Y, and Z because you are worth it. And in fact, I just commissioned a woman to do a painting for me that I'm going to give as a gift. And I asked her, what are your custom rates, for the various canvas sizes? And she said, well, I'm going to send you my price list. But she said, since you're such a raving fan, just let me know what you want to pay. And I said, no. I said, I am going to pay you full price because it is very important to me that women entrepreneurs, especially artists, are paid what they're worth. So I will not pay you 1 penny less than full price.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I that's what I appreciate about you so much, is because I feel like you truly represent what it means to be an ally. A lot of people talk a good game and they say things that sound good on the internet, but you really embody it with action. And I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the most important piece of it. We can say good things and we can say supportive things, but those need to be backed up with our actions and with our dollars.
Yes.
You told me you've dealt with some shame relative to privilege because you did have access to your white family's financial resources that did provide you with this fresh start as a teen. And you alluded to that when you said your sisters were like, oh, you're leaving us behind.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that situation. What happened and, how do you feel like that, was that really something that propelled you to the next level, that you felt like, if I didn't have that boost, maybe I wouldn't be where I am?
I was exposed to a standard of living with my aunt that I don't think I would have ever been exposed to. I was probably one of two people of color in the school I went to. And so I went from an inner city school to a school where it was predominantly all white people from rural Indiana. And my friends were wealthy at that time. And so, I mean, I would go to their homes and they had a pool inside of their house, not outside, inside the house.
Well, you definitely had richer friends than I did growing up. So I was just happy to have a friend with an outdoor pool.
I know, right? I was like, wait a minute, indoor pools exist? What is this world? Even just living with my aunt, my aunt, they're farmers. And so, they live on a lot of land, a lot of animals. That was even a different reality for me, just being on that type of land. And my aunt, so I have two aunts, they live together. And one of my aunts, they had a family home on the lake. And so in the summers, we would go to this family home on the lake and we're jet skiing and going on ski boats. And, I know for a fact, these are experiences I would not have had if I stayed back home. And so it really exposed me to what's possible and that there's a reality beyond the four walls I was dwelling in. And that's what really made me want to go to college and get an education, because that was the only pathway I knew to take at the time. If I would have known entrepreneurship was available, I probably would have took that. But no one talked about entrepreneurship. All I heard was education and have a career and make as much money as you can. And so that was the path I pursued. And I know that the environment I was in really inspired that, because when I was around all of the kids that living with my aunt and, these backgrounds that these kids are coming from, all they were talking about was what school they were going to. However, back home, a lot of my friends, they didn't see anything beyond high school. In fact, I remember when I graduated from college and got my bachelor's degree, two of my friends that I grew up with told me that they started college and they went and became RNs, registered nurses, because they had never seen a Black person graduate from college before. Wow. And so that, and we're not talking about 1950s. That just blew my mind about what type of environment we all were growing up in, where a lot of us were being raised in environments of struggle and scarcity and poverty and not so great situations. And so when I became the example, it blew my mind that I was leading in a way that my peers were starting to model after. And I didn't even think what I was doing was that great. I just thought I was doing what I needed to do to try to get ahead in life. And so it was really interesting, though, because I felt the guilt, because I thought to myself, I didn't ever really give myself credit. Like, it was my hard work. I was the one that put in the work. I was the one that did the things. I always made the connection between, but I got out. I had a ticket out. I was able to get away. And so that was kind of where some of that privilege guilt came in, because I felt, was it access to the resources that I had, the environment, the communities, the experiences that created this mindset? I don't know, and I did kind of feel a little bit of guilt around that. Like, some of my Black peers, I don't know if they had access to an environment or experiences like that.
Yeah. And obviously this was back in the day before the internet and social media. I mean, I just think about with social media, if you seek out positive influences, if you seek out people to be an inspiration, it's a lot easier to find now. I mean, now than ever. When we didn't have cell phones glued to our hands.
Exactly.
Back when we were in high school and college, and it was literally just the people who are physically surrounding you, like that was your whole world, that was your whole example. So there's, there are good uses of technology. I think that has certainly helped some things.
Yeah, that's really what built my belief that it's possible to be a woman of color and create wealth because of the internet. And different mentors I've worked with over the years, I met through the internet, and they were women of color who were embodying being a feminine leader and wealthy and sharing how they got there. And I was like, oh man, it's possible. And so the internet definitely helped me build my belief that it's possible so that I stay on this path and keep going.
So in the workplace, you have mentioned that Black women are underfunded but over-mentored professionally and in business. Have you had personal experience with that?
Yeah, I would say that's a phrase that's used a lot around the Black community with Black women, that were underfunded, over-mentored, where I've experienced it in both my professional career and in business, where people always want to give you advice or share with you, what they did, but that extra push, if you will, of, not just saying like, oh, give us money, but even giving us access to a network or giving us access to opportunities, access to funding, and that's one thing I'm appreciative of you with the Wealthy Woman Book Club. I feel like you've kind of highlighted me as like the trauma expert in the group. But I appreciate that because I'm in your space, I'm in your network. And to me, that is an example of not just being a mentor, but also opening up opportunity. And I have not experienced that, when I have worked with non-BIPOC women who are white, then they want to be helpful and they want to mentor. But then when it comes down to access to a network or access to resources or sharing me with people as a referral, that doesn't happen. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of Black women out there that experience that, where there's this concept of people want to mentor you and give you information, but we all know that it's not just the information. It's the people that we know, and it's the opportunities that we're given, and it's the networks that we're in, and then also the financial resources that we have or we don't have. And it does make a huge difference in our ability to grow businesses or grow professionally. Some people can catapult professionally or in business just by having a certain network or opportunities that may take me longer because I don't have access to that network or those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I could certainly see that in the corporate situation as well, where it's like, oh, I'm mentoring, I'm mentoring Casandra, and this is this special relationship. But when it comes down to it, is Casandra paid as much as Bob is paid?
Exactly.
They have the same, because the numbers don't lie. When you look at, yes, women in general are behind men dollar wise when it comes to working the exact same job classification, but women of color, both Black and Hispanic, it drops down to like 58 cents on the dollar. So it's like, let's keep up with the mentoring, but let's also put the dollars behind it. And I would say I was probably unconscious of this fact until I got involved with a group here in Cincinnati called Mortar. And I know you and I have talked about this particular organization, but they are basically an entrepreneurial incubator. And their goal is curing inner city poverty with entrepreneurship. 85% of the people that enroll are people of color. And close to 65% of the people who graduate from the program, which is like, 12 or 15 weeks, it's pretty intense, 65% are women of color. And when I got involved, with the group, the founder, Alan Woods, invited me to come and speak. And it was because I had interviewed him for my second book, Manage Money Like a Boss. And I came and spoke to one of his classes, and they had probably only been around for a couple of years. And that first class that I went to talk to, there was maybe like 12 people in there. And I think there was one white person. And, I was just really moved to hear their stories because, I was very fortunate that my family of origin was very loving, even though my parents got divorced. We never went hungry. We didn't get everything we wanted. We weren't spoiled, but, we had safety. We had our needs taken care of. And even as I was talking to them about how I crashed and burned financially in my 20s, that was a self-created situation. And as I heard many of the stories of the other people there, they resonated with some of the stuff that I talked about, because they're like, oh yeah, I've been there. Like, I've bounced checks to buy groceries.
Yeah.
They didn't have a choice. You know what I mean? Like, their situation was not one of their own making. Like, I had a safety net that I could go back to. I could go back to my parents, which I finally eventually did. My pride kept me from doing it for more years than I would care to admit. But that's when I became really passionate, and I said, I need to make sure that I am using my privilege to pull people forward. Yes. And, since then, usually at least once or twice a year, I go and I guest teach, but I donate copies of Money is Emotional to every student that goes through the Mortar program here in Cincinnati. And they have since spread their model to other cities. And so it's just been so cool to see the way that they support people, and that once people graduate and have started their businesses, they don't leave them alone. Like, they come alongside them and they continue to help them with funding, to help them with mentoring. And some of those people that I have met over, the course of the last 6 or 7 years, I buy from them.
That's awesome.
Like, I make it a priority, because I'm like, this is a Mortar student, and I have seen how their business has blossomed and how it's grown. And, some of them will reach out to me and ask me for advice. And it's like, I want everybody to be able to do that, and just seeing the progress that some of these people have made has just been extraordinary. One woman in particular, Crystal Marie of Magnificent Morsels. Oh my gosh, she catered my 50.5 birthday party. I was just like, girl, where have you been my whole entire life? I've been like eyeing her food on social media forever, and I'm just like, you're catering every single event that I host for the rest of my entire life. But it's just been so cool to see how she started this catering business part-time, and now she's got all these employees, she's got all these company vans. She just opened a restaurant, she's got a spice blend in a major grocery store chain, and it's just like, but it is because organizations like this and people, like me, who are donating to Mortar and who are volunteering, like, this is, that she's put in all the hard work, but she's also had the benefit of these people coming alongside of her and making sure that she's successful. And that's so, so important.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a really powerful organization, really putting in the effort to make sure that people get access to not just information, but actual practical ways to be successful.
Yeah. And they do grants and partner with corporations. So
that's awesome.
It's very cool. Let's wrap up with any other thoughts that you have around how both white women and men can be advocates not just with our words, but with our meaningful actions.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I'll say that I love about what you and I have done is the collaboration. We've collaborated in a workshop together with the Treasures Beyond Your Emotional Money Triggers workshop. And this year was the second one. And then we're collaborating here. And, I show up inside of the Wealthy Woman Book Club, and you asked me to, do breath work in there. And so it's really that collaboration piece, I would say, is a huge one, where you're allowing your platform or your reputation or whatever source for visibility that you have of being seen with another person of color, and allowing that to support them to be seen also. And so I definitely feel like that's a huge one, is just even that visibility of being exposed to other people who may have either resources or interest or referrals. Another one I would say is referrals. If someone knows that someone is a good suit for a product or a service or whatever business they have or whatever opportunity, even in corporate, making referrals and mentioning that person. And it's almost like your signature, speaking for them, allowing your signature to speak for them, so that sometimes referrals are the best form of marketing, whether if it's in corporate or in business, where if someone hears someone else say a name, they're more likely to go into that know, like, trust factor, like in branding we learn about, because this person mentioned the name. And then using your privilege to advocate and support, which is another example that I feel like you model really well, is, we're having this conversation here on your podcast, and you go to this organization and you're involved. It's just utilizing your privilege to advocate and support communities that may need it. And then, of course, if someone does have access to funding or resources, using that funding and resources to show fiscal support, because the referrals and the collaboration and the advocacy are great and all, and access to resources and funding is still one of our greatest issues. And so being able to give in that way is always helpful. And I like how we talked about the dignity part previously, earlier on in this episode, because I know for Black women and women of color, we do have pride around receiving support. And it could be hard for us to ask for help, even if we really need it. We'll sit there and suffer in silence. We will not say a word. We will grind our teeth. We will grit it out. And no one will know that we're behind the scenes on a struggle bus because we're trying to save face. Oh. And so it's like just being aware of that about women of color, that it's a pride thing. Sometimes the only thing we do have is the image we put out there, and it's not us trying to be performative or pretend, but we have our currency as our name and the image we put out there, and we're aware of that. And if you're feeling led to support a business or support a person in corporate with an opportunity, just being aware of what it really takes to show up in the world as a woman of color, and not always fully being aware of everything they may be dealing with. And if you have access to resources to support, then hey, support.
Yeah. Well, I'm like looking at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have talked for almost another hour, and I'm sure Bill is like screaming in the chat, like, you're going over time again. You're going over time. We knew this would happen. Well, Casandra, thank you so much for being here to continue this vital conversation. It's been an honor to have you on the podcast again, and it's an honor to be your friend. I do treasure our friendship.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I treasure our friendship too.
And I treasure both of you, but I'm back here screaming. That's why I mute my mic during all of this. So that it's like,
Thought you were coming in for the group hug.
I do treasure you both. I love you both. And Casandra, it's really nice to have you back for part 2. Feels like we should have you back for part 3, except it'd be another hour. And then, I wouldn't have a voice left. Okay.
We may have to have a series.
I took these nice team chats. I just like little things. This is a time reminder. This is a time reminder. No, it's
and
great.
I'm just
Thank
ignoring them.
No, and it's good, and I do appreciate it, and I think it's valuable. I think it's a valuable conversation. The only observation I have to offer really is that money's emotional, as this podcast notes, but money's also quirky in the sense that it's like what you do find in any community. I don't care about the color of the people involved, is that people with poor money attitudes have poor money attitudes, and they resent people. And Casandra, you kind of alluded to this. When someone starts to have aspirations that are above those that surround them, there is a force and a pushback, and I won't get into the psychological or emotional reasons for it, but there is a drag there, and and it is very, very real, and it is a very strong force to have to fight back against, and sometimes you have to know that it's like I have to trim these people off. I have to let these people go behind me now. They can either come with me, or they can stay behind, but they're not going to drag me back down. And that is maybe the hardest thing that most people have to face, is that reality that not everybody wants Casandra or Christine to succeed. It's like, it's true. But speaking of success, and on a much happier note, you were on episode 49, Casandra. Today is episode 50.
Oh, look at that.
There are not a lot of podcasts that make it to episode 50. So Christine deserves a little acknowledgement from me here that she has made it to 50 in terms of podcasts. So congratulations, Christine.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Well, so far I haven't run out of things to say.
That's amazing.
It is amazing, and it deserves some acknowledgement from everybody involved, especially on Christine's part. And Christine, for people who've been listening to the podcast and thinking that they would like to further a conversation with you, or learn more about the Wealthy Book Club, which you and Casandra both referenced during the course of this episode, tell us more about it. How do they get in touch with you, and how do they find out more about the Wealthy Woman Book Club?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is my name, ChristineLuken.com. If they look right up at the top, they can click on Wealthy Woman Book Club. You do not have to be wealthy yet. You just have to want to increase your financial standing and improve your money mindset. So if you want to claim the title of Wealthy Woman in the Making, we would love to have you, both Casandra and I, and all the other amazing ladies that are part of our group.
And I would encourage people to join. Those of you who are listening or are thinking it might be an interesting thing to do, well, find out. Go and find out. That's all I can tell you. Yeah. The other thing that I would do is encourage you, if you are not a subscriber already to this podcast, to become a subscriber. And that part is really easy. Just hit the follow button or the subscribe button that's right there in front of you. That way, every time Christine drops a new episode of Money is Emotional, you will be notified and you can listen to it. And if you like it, if you find it interesting, more importantly, if you find it useful, please share it with people and let them know about it. Word of mouth promotion is most welcome, and we truly appreciate it. And thank you for sharing it, as a matter of fact. So until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Christine Luken and the Money is Emotional podcast. Thank you for joining us, taking the time to listen, and I will remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's your choice. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Money is Emotional podcast. To get in touch, visit our website, at www.christineluken.com or drop us a line at hello@christineluken.com. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Christine Luken. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing or tax advice. Always seek the advice of your advisor, tax professional, or other qualified financial professional with any questions you may have regarding your personal finances.